Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. We want to welcome our friends and guests in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Brothers and sisters, friends around the world, today's program will entail one-on-ones with two very special guests. Our topic for discussion is a very thought-provoking topic. After the elections, what comes next? First up is a return guest, Muhammad Bashir. Brother Muhammad is a retired lawyer who saw a lot during his practice, his years of practice. He is also a social and political commentator and a businessman. And we are happy to have him back. Without any further ado, let's bring him on, Brother Muhammad Bashir.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be in company, good brother.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm doing fine, brother. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, things are well. Can I just do a little shameless plug real quick?
Sure.
I saw one of your favorite brothers, Brother Yusuf Rios, Imam Yusuf Rios, and he was talking about the impact that artists have on our communities. And he said we could either submit to having the Cardi B's of the world impact our children, or as artists, we can step forward and begin to assert ourselves and our deen in our faith. So my shameless plug is, you see this sweatshirt I'm wearing here?
Yes.
This is a leftist t-shirt, L-E-F-T-I-S-T, Muslim band, probably the baddest band in the land that nobody hears about. They just released their album. It's you can find it on any stream. They just did a promo for a Muslim women's shelter in North Carolina. So if you were to be able to purchase the album, the money would be going not to them, but to the shelter. So, I mean, that's the kind of effort. And by the way, the music is probably some of the best you've heard since maybe what's with Marvin Gaye. I'm telling you, they really wreck it, and they take hip hop and soul and mash them together with some Fela Kuti, with some Latino, with some Iranian beats, and they do something really, really unique as Muslims. And I think the Muslim world is probably waiting for this kind of rebound on the consciousness of our children. So, inshallah, shameless plug out of the way. Thank you for having me.
Well, you know something, Brother Muhammad, that is not a shameful plug, because you know, it's interesting, Akeem. The very last question I was going to put to you is in response to something that I put out and you responded to, and it had to do with this. But now it has become the first, the opening topic of conversation. For my Facebook friends and other friends and supporters within the social media sphere, on one of my pages, I came across, actually it was on one of the pages of the friend of a friend, and when I saw it, it grabbed my attention. It was a meme from Will Evans, who's I did a little background research on him. He's a young artist out of California. He said, quote, "Blacks should ban negative music starting today. and this is the only negative part of his message, if a nigga ain't talented enough to make a hit without talking about killing, hitting licks, hoes, and nonsense, then she shouldn't be allowed to participate in this culture. Now, aside from that one unfortunate word that he chose to use, which also should be banned by conscious folk within our tribe, this was a very positive message that I shared. And your response was, quote, that would mean the culture would support those who are dropping positive, uplifting messages with quality music. Can we say that? I'm streaming the band Leftists, all right, and their newly released album Strength on YouTube. Best music I've heard in 20 years. And I don't see the 1 million followers or likes like Lil Wayne has. Lil Wayne.
Right.
SubhanAllah. So alhamdulillah, we start out with that, get that out the way, and we both agree, Aki. We agree 100%. And I'm going to have to check Leftists out myself.
Check them out, bro. You'll be moved. Let me put it like this: as a Muslim, you'll be moved.
Okay.
Especially if you like Marvin, if you like Gil Scott, if you like the Roots, if you like people who are really put it on the line and also will allow you to pop your fingers or nod your head, but you take a message from it that makes you want to move, makes you want to do something better.
Okay.
It's there.
Alhamdulillah. All right. Okay, my brother. Now I wanna go to right into the mix. We want to talk about, all right, after the elections, what comes next.
Mm-hmm.
You published a couple of very thought-provoking pieces on Facebook that came to my attention. One on October 31st, days before the election. You said, quote, "In no other time in my life have I felt so disappointed by the response of Black America." Let me take that back. Remember when the children were dropping like summer leaves on a freshly fall day in Atlanta? The media called them the Atlanta child murders. A man named Wayne Williams was arrested, tried, and convicted for the murder of 2 adults, and the culture and country closed the books on the 27 dead children. And that was just the ones they found. For me, it was and remains the crime of the century because unlike OJ or even 9/11, there was no closure. Even for those who believe OJ did it or 9/11 was an inside job, they can move on because at least it was debated. Atlanta's children aren't even an afterthought. So as I read post after post debating Trump's attacks on America as his cult, interesting choice of word, and I agree, pretends he is not out to steal and loot the country while he rewrites the Constitution, or I listen to desperate Biden supporters humble themselves, hold their noses, and demand I hold mine while what they are really supporting is a Trump must go agenda without an articulated thought on how Joe will impact Black America, I'm reminded of Atlanta. Black America is juiced for November 3rd and has all the proper American platitudes, hashtags, and slogans. You are having the same debates every other community is having about the election and America when you have never been anything more than a debate topic in America. From 3/5 constitutional questions to emancipation to Black Lives Matter, you are a topic, not a force to be reckoned with. Black trumpets and Black Bideneers, or Black trumpets, not being able to put aside an American thought process to think, unite, and act independently for the benefit of the Black community has always been and continues to be self-destruction. When you get this process over, you will then be debating what? Budget priorities, the tax plan, criminal justice reform, the impact of Black women in voting with the people who only see you as a mass that has no will or power to change anything, while you are the one community who needs things to dramatically change. Mark my words. Your experience in America is uniquely different from every other community. Until you put them aside and focus on you, you'll always be as ignored as 27 unsolved or undebated Atlanta children. I was disappointed until I remembered you are who you are. End quote. And that was on the 29th of October, a few days before the election.
MashaAllah.
Then comes November 7th. This is what you wrote on November 7th and posted on Facebook. Quote, I'm watching closely, and let me say my hat is off to Black women around the country who stood on what they say they believe. I voted to support your effort, not because I believe the change Black America and thus America must have can be achieved by the vote, but because your message was one of collective work. I support that. And while I'm on it, I have been a huge critic of people like Stacey Abrams, especially after her Georgia run led so many to the polls, and they watched as the guy who was in charge of counting the votes was her opponent, which to me read like leading lambs to a slaughter. But she didn't quit on them. She rallied her people for this fight and came off like a boss. My hat is off. Don't get me wrong. I respect leadership organization and the effort in Georgia, but, and you knew there was a but. I pray this is a start of an understanding that America changed the driver, but the car is still running. The value still the same. Allow me the benefit in my waning years of seeing organizing that leads Black America to a radical revolution of values, because we cannot afford to replace a brutal slave master with a kinder slave master if we don't recognize the common denominator is America perceiving Black America as the slave. I pray we can teach America how to be humane. And if we turn leadership back over to them, can we expect the driver to be any less than Clinton? Can we expect any more than Black bodies used every election cycle? Time to drive. And brothers, 18%? Really? Join and build before it's too late. Brother, these are two thought-provoking pieces of commentary that you shared on Facebook. Let us start there. Mm-hmm. Expound further on what you had to say on the 29th and on the 7th.
MashaAllah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. When I was writing those pieces, I probably wasn't as emotional as I am right now listening to them, truth be told. If someone had read that to me, I would have thought about my waning years. And in reflecting, there's two things that I find about the entirety of the scenario. One is, again, the election to me and the vote in and of itself is as Jamil El-Amin, H. Rap Brown probably said back in 70, 71 on Like It Is, it's only as good as its ability to get the people to organize. So when I was referencing Stacey Abrams, who for me the jury is still out. I mean, before I was upset, now she came back to balance, now square one, let me see what you're going to do. She used the vote as a way of organizing the people. What happens though in the Black community is that the Black community rallies around platitudes and incidents and slogans without the necessary step forward, the next step. The step was get rid of Trump. I hope no one thinks that the Black community came out to support Joe Biden, with the exception of the Jim Clyburns of the world and the people who think like him, and maybe even the Stacey Abrams of the world, the people who are embedded in the Democratic Party. Black people came out because they saw potentially a despot, someone who was inarticulate, someone who was disrespectful to Black America, disrespectful to all America, and Black people inherently, especially the young Black people, were inherently upset that this guy would ride shotgun over the country while they were still trying to find a way to embed themselves in it, trying to find ways to become make the culture change, and make the culture change for the better. George Floyd really set a watermark for a lot of these kids. But for the older generations, they do the same thing every generation. Every 2 years, they call out black bodies. Every 4 years, they call out black bodies. They don't call out black intellectuals. They don't call out black thought process, because they're not talking to the masses of black people. They are using black bodies for the purposes of moving an agenda in, and that agenda now is Joe Biden. So again, so when I say, do you move from the brutal slave master, Donald Trump, to the kinder, what appears to be the kinder slave master? See, because we thought Bill Clinton was the first black president. Until we begin to,
some of us did.
Right. I mean, that was the moniker. That's the slogan that I'm talking about. And again, I'm not.
Yeah.
I think Jim Clyburn is a joke with his slogan. But we bit on that. We bit on that black president thing so that we could feel like we were included in Bill Clinton. And then what did Bill Clinton do? Ushered in private prisons, ushered in the criminalization of immigration, ushered in mass incarceration, you know, on the back of our communities. Because he didn't see our community as valuable except as defined by white value system. And so until we began to move away from that value system, and that's what I mean when I say it's time for us to drive. Until we move away from a value system that has been adverse to black progress, we are always going to be subject to, whether it be a brutal slave master like Donald Trump, or what we consider to be a nice slave master, because they always both going to see us as the slave. The people, they can do what they want to do, and you just pick up the pieces. We'll take care of you at the end. Isn't that what Malcolm said? You voted Kennedy in, but he treated you treated him first, and they treat you last. And therein lies the problem. But if we're talking about a problem now that Malcolm talked about in '63, the community is in serious trouble. We are literally playing the same role that we played then. So therefore, if you're going to use this vote, if you're going to use this energy now it's time for you to take the drive and take the wheel, push whoever else is in the wheel to the side, and begin to put forward an agenda that addresses the masses of black people. Because again, no one in the culture has the absolute necessity for the culture to change the way it sees everything than the black community. Healthcare, black community at the bottom. Employment, black community at the bottom. Prison reform, mass incarceration, criminal justice, black community at the bottom. Banking, black community at the bottom. Who needs to see a change more than the black community? And if you constantly turn to these people who have historically demonstrated that you get the trickle down, and you turn to them for leadership, you get exactly what you deserve. They will put you to the side exactly the way they did the Atlanta child murders. Well, they're no longer important. We already convicted somebody. And this is exactly the way they treat Black America. That's my heart was, and that's what my opinion was.
Now, from your perspective, Akeem, what does it look like? What does it look like, you know, the Black American community taking the wheel of this vehicle that has been driving in the same direction, irrespective of which partisan has been at the wheel for so long? What does it look like?
What I'm suggesting here is a universal understanding as opposed to an individual understanding. Let me give you some examples. The war in Vietnam. The war in Vietnam is white America is running off to Canada or coming up with bone spurs in their knee to keep from fighting that war. Poor blacks can't come up with bone spurs because they don't have any doctors in their community to write them off. They can't go up to Canada without being noticed because they're black, just like the escaped slave. But one thing happened, an incident happened. You remember what it was? They tried to draft the heavyweight champ of the world.
Yes.
And the heavyweight champ said, I'm not going off to no Vietnam to kill no brown people, because ain't no brown people ever called me nigger.
Right.
Individual effort by an individual black man that took the wheel. And the whole dynamic of that war changed. by virtue of that comment, because all of a sudden now white kids began to burn their draft cards. I'm not going off to Canada now. Someone took the wheel and turned it to the left. When Dr. King said America needed a radical revolution of values, and I'm not supporting the war in Vietnam, all of black leadership in the country turned against him. But it completely turned the wheel. Right? Turned it to the left or turn it to the right, whichever way you want to go.
Right.
Now imagine 200 Dr. Kings. Imagine that the NBA players in their bubble decided we're not going to play. Just like Muhammad Ali said, take my title. I don't care. I'm not going to deal with this injustice of killing brown people. Now you're talking about a unified effort. But that means that Black America has to sit down like they did in 72 in Gary, Indiana, and come up with an agenda and then stick with that agenda. This is how we are going to move our community. The Black Panthers did in California in a microcosm what should be being done around the country universally. Sit down. Look, there's no, and the Muslim community, oh my God. Can you imagine what would happen if the Muslims sat down and decided, wait a minute, I'm from India, 2 generations in, but Mauri Saalakhan is from America, 10 generations in. Which one do you think probably understands Pharaoh better? Probably Mauri Saalakhan. So maybe I should listen to what his agenda is. And Mauri Saalakhan comes up and he says, you know what? All of you who are Desi doctors, Arab doctors, etc., we need Tuesday and Thursday clinics, free clinics, just like the Panthers did. And all of you who own these grocery stores where you selling pig feet out the back door in a pickle jar, and you Muslim cigarettes that people are using to roll up, we say, no, we're not going to have that here. Just like the young brother said, we're not going to have that kind of music where you do this, that, or third. We're not going to have that here. But what you can do is you can contribute at a discount food to our community. Right? Isn't that what they used to do? They used to go to the market. People would say, here's the food. They would go and feed their communities.
That's right, yeah.
It's about organized efforts that says to the community and to the world that we are not necessarily accepting your way of leadership because it has never benefited us. Muslims begin to do Muslim banking. Black Americans begin to do Black American banking. But they can't do it where they take the bank and put it on the Wall Street Stock Exchange, because you know where that's going to go. You know what happened with the money there. That becomes speculation. That's why you got war in Congo and they're trying to bomb Ethiopia now. But that collective work, that's the necessary part. That's what I see. I see now, and oh man, an unbelievable opportunity for the Muslim who's born and raised here in America, especially this indigenous so-called Muslim who is Black, to be able to grab a hold of the reins of leadership and to begin to show the world, 1, Islam, 2, okay, we consider ourselves Black Americans, and this is the history of Black America. This is what has been done, and this is how we're going to move forward. And take the wheel of leadership. That is, whether you decide to be a politician, then you have to speak truth to power based on an agenda that comes from your experience. I don't want to hear no nonsense about prison reform unless it's coming from a Black experience. So when they say defund the police, they know what they're talking about. Mr. Clyburn, you may not know because you don't come from that experience. You're a Black man, but you don't think like no Black man. You don't understand what it means to defund the police. This is why you can't explain it. This is why you're upset with the so-called young Democrats. But the ones who can explain it, organize, 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 to quote Kwame Ture. And then put all that organization together for the purposes of leading. Take control of the wheel, the way Muhammad Ali took control of the wheel, the way Dr. King took control of the wheel, but as a body. And when you begin to see that kind of organization, I'm telling you, the world will flip overnight, because the world, listen to me talking with 66 years. The world is waiting for the Black, so-called Black American to move the world forward. They moved it forward with jazz, hip hop, soul music, entertainment on every level. And if you look at it intellectually on every level, your Dr. Benz, your Van Sertimers, your Francis Welsings, your Amos Wilsons, every level that you can think of. If you look around, you'll find your Malcolm X. You'll find people that I was at El-Hajj, brother, and the brothers was quoting me Malcolm from the autobiography of Malcolm X. Think about that. Think about the impact that this struggle here is having. That's what is missing because it's individualized. When it comes to the point to where autobiography of Malcolm X becomes critical to the understanding of every Black man and Black woman here in America, and they organize around the principle that he is articulating there, they organize around the principles of Dr. King that he articulated in his I Have a Dream speech, the first half, where he tells people we coming to get our check, where we trying to unite the poor people. We're going to put up a tent city in Washington, D.C., and we're going to stay here until we get what we deserve. Then you're talking about completely changing, radically changing the thought process of America, because white America has no need to change. They are acceptable. They are accepting of the way things are. The only difference is that Trump pushed them to the extreme limit. So they now don't want to come back to the Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan kind of leadership, as opposed to a radical revolution of values.
Speaking about the mainstream American public and the tensions that have been created within that mainstream. I mean, we do have a lot of folk of the lighter hue who have good hearts, sincere minds and intentions, who recognize the danger of this character that's been in office for the past 4 years and what he represents on a larger level. But then you also have the sycophants who blindly, well, many of them blindly follow him, and others willfully, you know, as you stated, as a cult. With that being said, I'd like to get your perspective, both from the the hat you wear as a retired lawyer, well versed with U.S. constitutional law and how the machinations of government are supposed to run in this country, and as a social and political commentator who comes from the African American tradition, which is very unique, as you've correctly pointed out, very unique in perspective, very unique in sensitivity, very unique in what it has to offer in the area of reform. From that perspective, let's get your thoughts on what just took place this weekend here in Washington, D.C., where you had this so-called Million MAGA march. You had you had these these thousands of folk that descended on downtown Washington. I believe the convergence point was Freedom Plaza, and they marched from there to the U.S. Supreme Court with the purpose of conveying a very clear message. What are your thoughts on this mobilization that we're seeing, a very hyper mobilization in defense of this character who continues to cry foul in the elections that just took place? What are your thoughts?
There are two things. There are two things that I deal with. I do a show on Heritage Sports Radio Network, HSRN. You can go to hsrn.com and probably download it. But last week I talked about, I usually do a session in it called Just in Case. And I compare a case, and I take the case, I explain it, and then I give you social impacts. You know what case I chose last week?
What's that? California
versus Charles Manson. You and I are old enough to understand Charles Manson and Helter Skelter.
Yes.
Helter Skelter, for those who don't know, was a song by the Beatles that a guy named Charles Manson took, and because of his psychedelic drugs, et cetera, he came up with this thought process. Now, people say he came up with it, but listen to the thought process. There's going to be a race war. And in that race war, the black man is going to win, and they're going to kill off as many whiteys as they can. But they'll be too ignorant, having followed white thought process all along, to know how to govern. So he'll squat in the desert, and then they'll have to come looking for a white man to lead them. And he'll be that dude. He'll be the joint. Mm-hmm. That was his Helter Skelter. That was his thought process. That thought process sounds uniquely like the thought process that goes on here today, but they call him crazy. What he did was, to start this helter-skelter, was, since black people wouldn't bite on his rhetoric, they went out and they killed Sharon Tate, for the people in the house, an actress. And then the LaBianca family, they killed them, butchered them, and they painted on the walls things like pig, this, that, and the third. It was supposed to be the people who realized the black people did it. And then they would come after the black people, and the black people would fight back. They descend here on Washington, D.C. like a cult. And I use the word cult because I understand Charles Manson, because I understand the mentality of people who just follow blindly. The kids who did the killing for him followed blindly. When they come to Washington, D.C., think about the mentality. They come to Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, 45% black, by the way. But the bottom line is they come with their attitude. They don't come for peaceful protest. They come with their attitude. What do I mean by their attitude? Take a look at your footage and see how many of them were masked up. Because in D.C., you got mandatory masks. You got to wear that mask. But they were allowed, because the privilege of being white in America, the uniqueness of having the power in white in America, is that you can go where you want to and do whatever you want to do. And this is what the cult leader represents. Because he has never said to them, honestly, that masks help. They don't care about anything but their lifestyle and their way of doing things. This is why they can never afford to lead you, because they don't care about anything but them. That's the nature of the cult. He is the cult leader, and they follow whatever it is he says. If he says jump off a bridge, they jumping off the bridge. Trust me on this. When he said liberate Michigan, what did they do? They marched on the Capitol with guns.
That's right.
He said liberate Virginia. What did they do? They marched on the Capitol with guns because he said so, not because it was the right thing to do. They don't care about the right thing to do because the leader doesn't care about the right thing to do. Charles Manson didn't care about the right thing to do. All he wanted to do was be the leader. Doesn't that sound eerily familiar, even though at a large scale?
Yes.
So they come in here as super spreaders in D.C. And what did he just do in all of those places where he had his open rally? He became a super spreader of COVID. Cult-like behavior. So when I'm looking at it as an attorney, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at these guys have no understanding of precedent. They have no understanding of the law. They have no respect for the law. And so therefore, they believe they can do whatever they want to. I was really surprised. I think the mayor didn't shut this thing down because, again, you have the right to peaceful protest, but one of the parts of the law is that you have to petition the government, say, we're going to come and we're going to have a march, and then they give you a permit to march, and they tell you the parameters. They're not taking away your right to peaceful protest. They're just saying, here are the parameters, right? So let's assume they had decided to come to D.C. and all carry their AR-15s. You don't have that right in D.C. You don't have the open carry in D.C. So she can eliminate that. But same thing she could have done with the mask. If you come here and you want to protest, as a matter of law, we wear masks. The fact that they didn't do that, that speaks volumes of the nature of the mentality of black leadership willing to follow or to submit to a leadership that cannot direct black people or America in a direction that is positive. As a commentator, these are the kind of things that nobody is really telling you about. They're not really telling you about this guy in the White House and his people, the people who supported him at maybe 62, 65% of whites in America voted for Trump. Now think about this. This is the guy over close to 300,000 dead people over Corona. Here's a guy who knew how dangerous it was according to reports and never reported it to the people. Here's a guy who knows, based on his CDC and all the experts, that wearing a mask and social distancing will have prevented much of what went on, but he still doesn't do it. He still keeps hinting that it's a hoax, and his people are following him blindly. So if I'm a commentator and I see that, I don't see that as inconsistent with his behavior that he will not accept his defeat in the election. I don't see it separate and apart from it. I see it as the same mentality. The mentality that, don't worry, look, I'm the true leader. This guy is not the true leader. And the people are coming here because they're saying it's not the true leader. All you have to do is go look at some of the videos on some of these court actions. And look at these My Cousin Vinny lawyers that he's bringing up there. Some of these guys should not, some of the arguments they're making are so juvenile. They're like not even first-year law school arguments. Don't know what hearsay is? We were told that so and so and so. And the judge said, well, isn't that hearsay? I mean, show me some facts. Well, that's a true statement because so and so said it. It's called hearsay, sir. You can't come to court with hearsay. But this is the level that they have dumbed America down to the point to where they don't care about what it says, what the law says, what the righteousness says, or even what the vote says. They just care what the cult leader says. And if you're not commenting on that, then watch. Watch and see if this guy doesn't try some level of taking over the government within the parameters of the legal process, like trying to get the electoral colleges that are representatives that are in Republican-run states like Michigan, like the legislators run by Michigan out there, like Wisconsin, to flip their electoral college votes, even though he lost the state.
Right.
Because that's the mentality. I don't want to power. I should be in power. I don't care what anybody says. And his people follow it like a cult. And they can call it whatever they want to, but that's the way I see it. And another thing, I think people who follow Democrats follow exactly the same thing. They follow Democrats not because they stand with the people or stand for what the people stand for. This is why the first attack out of the Democrats' mouth was against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the so-called progressives. We lost these House seats because of these progressives and their slogans like defund the police, Green New Deal. Otherwise, we would really have control of the House. That's that same cult-like mentality. The Democrats want this, Biden wants this, the white head leader, the master wants it, so therefore we want it. Not that we have an independent thought in our bodies at all.
Alhamdulillah, brother. I couldn't think of a better place to end our conversation on today than that. And inshallah ta'ala, we will be having you back again on this Salam Media platform. But until then, we bid you a thank you, brother, for your perspective. And may Allah ta'ala give enormous bounty to the rest of your day and to the work that you're doing in the field that you have situated yourself within since leaving the practice of law. May Allah ta'ala bless you. Assalamu alaikum, Hakeem.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. You thanking me, but I should be thanking you. May Allah bless you. Continue to keep your platform live and vibrant and keep the people listening. Alhamdulillah.
Ameen.
Keep it going. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Next, we're going to have another very special guest. And in fact, the guest I'm about to introduce to you is one that there's an additional notch of specialness for this next guest. His name is Mustafa Sultan Salahuddin. What makes this brother a notch more special is the fact that he is my brother from the same mother. Without any further ado, I'd like to bring my brother Mustafa on for the first time on the Salam Media platform. And inshallah ta'ala, we will begin our conversation. Assalamu alaikum, Mustafa.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brother.
Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah.
How's everybody home, brother?
Everybody's good, alhamdulillah. They send their love and their greetings. MashaAllah. They're healthy and alhamdulillah, Allah's merciful.
Brothers and sisters in Facebook, I have some outstanding nieces who I love to pieces. And alhamdulillah, one has just entered college for her first year, and we pray that Allah protects her and enables her to continue to soar at this next level of academic struggle. My brother Mustafa is a labor leader in Connecticut, and doing some outstanding work. Let's begin with you sharing with the audience, brother, what union you represent. You're leading there in Southern Connecticut, and what the crux of your work is as a labor leader in that neck of the woods.
Certainly. I am the president and business agent of the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1336 out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. ATU headquarters is based right there in Maryland. And I have 466 members that I govern at 7 different locations, some being fixed route transit bus operators, some being mechanics, some being dispatch supervisors, and some paratransit operators, as well as dispatch supervisors. So I have an array of different individuals with different contracts that I'm in charge of and have the responsibility of governing. I do their grievances, their contract negotiations, their arbitrations, you name it. Sometimes I feel like a foster parent rather than a union president at times, because it is tedious work at times, but it's very rewarding in nature, because being a retired police officer of 25 years, the one thing that I always prided myself on was protecting people's rights. And after retiring in 2010, and going back to the transit, the transit profession where I started, it was fitting to run for union president when that opportunity presented itself, because again, it was fighting for people's rights. So that is the bulk of what I do. And I just, matter of fact, we just ratified a contract on the just last week, and that's being put up for a vote before the members. So it's a lot of work, and not only that, we deal with legislation, trying our best to get some laws passed that will govern transit operators, because transportation in the United States of America, the infrastructure is I will use the word weak, for the simple fact that we're so far behind other countries that this country considers third world. If you were to see their transportation, if you go to Europe and you go to all these other foreign countries and you see their transportation system, it works far better than the transportation we have in America in terms of infrastructure. The infrastructure, they spend a lot of money on their infrastructure of transportation, because it is their meat and potatoes, and it's also the fabric. It was that in America. It came from stagecoaches to trains, the buses, and but the powers to be don't view it as a necessity, just a commodity. So it's challenging.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless you and fortify you in that challenge, brother.
I mean.
Our topic for today is, after the elections, what comes next? I'm glad that you referenced the fact that you are a retired police officer. In the past, whenever I've referenced my position on there being good police officers within a very compromised culture of policing in America, you are one of my reference points. You have been one of my reference points, and I know other individual police officers in different parts of the country, alhamdulillah, that are good officers that take the responsibility to protect and serve, seriously. But unfortunately, the system of policing throughout America has been compromised from day one.
Absolutely.
So alhamdulillah that, I can point to my brother as one of the better examples of, you know, what can be within policing. Although I should note that when my brother retired, it was under a circumstance,
Absolutely.
and I was glad that he did. It was under a circumstance where you came under attack and even had to go so far as to defend yourself in a court of law because of the kind of police officer that you had been for many years. Alhamdulillah, Allah bless you to come out on top. You won that case, and then you know, at the advice of your brother and no doubt others who were concerned about your welfare, you took our advice to retire. MashaAllah ta'ala. And so now you're leading in another area. May Allah ta'ala bless you in what you are doing and what you have been, Aki, as an example for us.
Ameen.
You know, we are in the crux of a pandemic, a global pandemic. The United States of America has shamefully been the epicenter of this pandemic for months now. Just yesterday, it was either yesterday or the day before yesterday, I saw the report that America added 184,000 coronavirus cases in a 24-hour period. There have been well over 200,000 deaths from coronavirus in the United States. Again, we are #1 in the world. And you know, there appears to be right now no end in sight. What you and I had a conversation, you know, maybe it was 3 months or so ago when New York, I don't know if it still is, I'm gonna have to go back and check, but when New York was the epicenter of the epicenter in the United States. And you and I had a conversation about, you know, the condition that New York City was in, with the refrigerated trucks outside of hospitals, with bodies, and with, you know, the pats on the back that Governor Cuomo was receiving because of the perceived positive role that he was playing in the pushback. And you made a very insightful critique of Cuomo and, you know, the Democratic administration in the city that I feel is very important to revisit now for this conversation. What comes next? Could you share with us what that critique was of Cuomo and, you know, looking at what was going on in New York vis-a-vis the coronavirus and how you were viewing it as a labor leader out of Connecticut?
Well, it's no doubt, you know, Cuomo is a good leader, but under this pandemic, he took the opportunity to seize a moment where it could make it could represent something that would make him look grand. You know, what people don't understand is some of the injustices that were going on during that same time that he stayed on our television set. Like you said, there was people dying on a daily basis. They had refrigerated trucks, tractor trailer trucks that were housing the bodies, and that, as we speak, is starting to it's at the beginning of that end now. There's people dying in New York City every single day in the hospital, and they're being placed in those refrigerator trucks again. These trucks are showing up, and they're showing up in large numbers, and in anticipation for what's to come. And some of the people are already dying. Cuomo appeared to start having a rift with Trump over equipment that he needed for the state, and Trump would push back. But what was also found out that the respirators that were being given to the city of New York were not all being utilized in the city of New York. As a matter of fact, there were very accredited reports that the New York State was actually selling some of those respirators to other states. They received them for free, and they were selling them at a tremendous market price. And these are facts. These aren't just conspiracy theories or someone saying that what they saw. This was investigated, and it was found to be true. So Como tried to seize a moment of despair to catapult himself politically higher. There was people even saying he should be the president because he's handling this thing so much better than the actual president. And so, you know, during that time, I think Como that success started to overtake him to the point where he became very arrogant in that regard, and it's unfortunate. But it was plain as a nose on your face. Nothing was changing. A lot of blame was going on. The governor was blaming the mayor. The mayor was blaming the governor. But when at the end of the day, people were dying on both sides of that coin, and in the nursing homes and in the hospitals, and nothing was changing. The numbers were still continuing to climb. So, you know, when I looked at that, I just saw what you know, these political realms are good for. They're good for seizing the moment and taking credit for things that will catapult them, they believe, politically in our political system. And it's unfortunate because they're putting literal lives over ambitions.
Mm-hmm. You had also said something about, and pardon me if I get this wrong, but and you can correct me. Said something about the medical infrastructure in New York having been diminished. I don't know if it was under Cuomo or under his predecessor, or but it had been diminished. Hospitals, I guess it may have been privatization, and then public hospitals being closed, etc. Because there was many reports about how people were also dying in their homes. People who were without medical care, people who, and as well as people who were afraid to try to go to the hospital, and they were dying in their homes in large numbers. And we spoke about the diminished medical infrastructure of New York. You remember that?
Yes, absolutely. And they were closing down a lot of the hospitals that they felt couldn't adequately deal with this pandemic. They were also opening up old stadiums that were staging as hospital facility, outside hospital facilities to deal with this. And yeah, that was a failed effort. Because how do you close hospitals in neighboring boroughs, giving people less opportunity or access to medical assistance, and that in itself was a travesty, because you had low-income people. This was affecting primarily the low-income people in the state of New York and in New Jersey. And who already have a terrible access to medical treatment. And what that did was all it did was put an extra burden on it. And you know, there were Facebook accounts where nurses and doctors were actually going on Facebook and saying that they're allowing people to literally die these were just these people were live streaming from hospitals and crying and pleading that somebody say something, that people start looking into these things and people start protesting about these things, because they're literally letting people die, because they had no solution to what this virus did in terms of how it riddled the body, and destroyed major organs. They had no answer to it, and the answer to them was keep them comfortable. Just keep them as comfortable as you possibly can. That's all we can do. And keep them comfortable and allow them to die. And this resonated across this several states adjacent to New York and New Jersey, and this became the norm. This became the norm. Here we are going back into another phase of the pandemic, and it's starting to rise again with that same solution. They say they do have a vaccine that is promising, but that remains to be seen. The trial periods that it's in now is the side effect trial periods, to see what adverse effect it would have on human beings. And there's been some clinical trials, and there's been some things that were reported about headaches, about a burning sensation, a lot of different things. But wow, it just remains to be seen where this goes now. And as you can see, those same politicians who were gracing the airways of what they were going to do, how they were going to do it. Their only solution right now is to reduce they come to the realization that what needs to be done is total shutdown. And now you see a different speech. When this pandemic first started, there were people who actually benefited from it. And now the whole perception of it is totally different, because now these same politicians are echoing the fact and primarily blaming Trump. And you can definitely blame this administration with the negligence that brought about this melee. You can certainly do that, but at the same time, you don't use it to benefit your own rhetoric. And they're seeing now that the whole narrative is changing to a shutdown period where we have to scale back what it is we allow people to do, and we may have to go into a total lockdown at some point to see if they can get a handle on this thing. And it's just unfortunate that people had to die as almost an experimental process of how this works. I mean, look what they did with our kids. They put our kids back to school. Trump said that he would not release funding unless those doors were open and kids went back to school. This administration was basically forcing you to put your children in harm's way. And now the schools are systematically starting to close. Connecticut closed as of yesterday. We got a robocall that stated that effective immediately until January 16th, all schools will go to virtual learning. And Trumbull, Connecticut did it the day before. So the state of Connecticut is looking to, and you got to remember, the funding has been satisfied. Every November 3rd of every year, the federal government releases its funding to all colleges, universities, and public school systems. And you knew the writing was on the wall. Let's just keep these things open until we get our funding. And once we get our funding, we're going to shut that down. And what does that do to labor? Well, now the school bus company is no longer utilized and is no longer needed. So you're going to have scores of school bus drivers that are going to have to start filing for unemployment, because the companies are claiming that customer is no longer paying them for work that's not done, and they're going to have to reimburse some of their contractual, some of that contractual money that was put there to pay their employees. So this pandemic is going to develop another pandemic, the pandemic of economics, and there's going to be major closing. There's people who already closed for good, and this will shut the rest of those people who barely hung on. If we don't get a handle on this thing, this will force them to do the very same thing, and you're going to have countless people out there. This is very challenging for labor, for the simple fact that we have to try to protect their, under a lot of our contracts, we have what they call guarantees, and we were successful in the first phase of making sure that those guarantees were satisfied, but they got their lawyers to check and to look into these things and see how they can get around those guarantees. And how they got around them was for the companies to either scale back or give back some of the monetary contractual monies that were afforded for that service. And so now the guarantee goes out the window. So it's a very trying times, and it's particularly for labor and those individuals who have to continue through this pandemic to feed their families, to feed and shelter their families.
My brother, we're going to have to bring this conversation to a close, but I want to thank you. And inshallah ta'ala, we are gonna have you back, Aki. We're gonna have you back. Inshallah ta'ala. But I wanna thank you for joining us today, for providing some perspective on the topic that we chose for today. And inshallah ta'ala, may Allah ta'ala bless the rest of your day. Give my salams to everyone. And inshallah ta'ala, we will talk later. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And jazakallah khair, my dear brother.
Alhamdulillah.
Sake of Allah,
Alhamdulillah.
my blood brother, and just for the sake of sake, brother, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. Your love is back.
And may Allah reward you, brother, and keep you strong and healthy.
Ameen.
And all that you do.
Ameen. Brothers and sisters, friends of Facebook, friends of Salam Media, I want to conclude our broadcast today, as I normally do, with the Quranic dua from Salatul Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر, which means, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, the token of time through the ages, verily humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.